Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first STEM Circle Corporate Members event of 2021. My name is Susan Rakes. I'm Director of Learning at the Science Museum Group, and I'm really delighted to welcome you all to what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion exploring the challenges and opportunities involved in inspiring, attracting, and retaining a diverse STEM workforce. As the demand for STEM skills in the UK has reached a critical point, we recognise we must all work together to invest in the workforce of the future. We can do this by raising young people's aspiration and knowledge of STEM careers and, crucially, make these increasingly accessible to a more diverse audience. Our mission here at the Science Museum Group is to inspire futures, and our number one priority is to help raise the science capital of society. In doing so, we champion the growth of a STEM literate workforce by creating a generation that values science and can access it no matter what their background is. Our Science Capital work here at the Science Museum Group, alongside our value of being open for all, is about making STEM relevant, accessible, equitable and welcoming for everyone, regardless of their background. At its heart, Science Capital is a social justice model, helping everyone to have a stake in the future and an opportunity to shape it for themselves and for others. Our work with children and young people and with their teachers, parents and carers is crucial in opening up job and life opportunities and, as our mission says, inspiring their futures. This mission grows ever more important in today's world full of unprecedented challenges and is one that we cannot achieve without the invaluable support of our partners from the business community. To that end, I'd like to thank our current STEM Circle members, Bloomberg, Centrica, Cisco, MathWorks, Northern Trust and Sanofi. These organisations recognise the importance of STEM skills and through their support of the Science Museum demonstrate their commitment to inspiring the creative thinkers and problem solvers of the future. So without further ado, let's kick off this afternoon's session. I'm delighted to be joined today by a panel of speakers, starting with Kweilyn Aarongrote, a senior partner at McKinsey & Co, where she specialises in strategy and operational transformations. Today, Kweilyn will be sharing some aspirational highlights from areas of her extensive expertise, including women in STEM, women in leadership and the future of work. We're also really pleased to be joined by representatives from three of our STEM Circle members, Catherine Badley, Head of CSR at Cisco, Karen Hutchison, Director of Global Talent Acquisition at Centrica, and Felicia Pinto, Head of Regulatory Affairs for UK and Ireland at Sanofi. At the Science Museum, we believe that strong collaboration with the public, private and philanthropic sectors are essential to driving change. So it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity today to learn from these organisations and share experiences with each other. In a moment, I'll hand over to Kweilyn before moving on to a 30-minute panel discussion with our STEM Circle representatives. At the end of both sessions, it will be your chance to ask the panel some questions. So please do submit your questions into the Q&A box throughout the webinar. Kweilyn, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Kweilyn Aarongrote. I lead a lot of the gender equality research globally at McKinsey & Company, and also work with McKinsey Global Institute to look at women in STEM and beyond in leadership roles. I first got exposed to STEM actually through my father, who's a doctor, and so was always aware of science. But when I was very young, he actually became quite sick and quit his job, actually. He became so sick that when he did recover, thankfully, he quit his job and took my brother and me around the world. We traveled for about 15 months, and that's my first and earliest exposure to STEM. He was teaching us math, school, science. So for biology, we would go to the market. He would get a pig heart and dissect it with us, and that was our biology class. And so it can be a very early, but also parent-led exposure to STEM. That's the earliest that I remember. Now, many years later, I've got three young daughters, an 8-year-old and 5-year-old twins. And I'm struck by the fact that if I ask them to draw a picture of a scientist, a picture of an engineer, or even a picture of a genius, all three of them, given the socialization, would draw a picture of a boy or a man, perhaps an Albert Einstein-like figure. And that's exactly the socialization that I think is so important to equalize so that we can look at all of these leadership figures without that gender bias. Today, I'm going to walk us on a bit of a tour on gender equality in STEM globally. And so if you flip up to this first page, a couple key stats that we wanted to share. If you look around the world, almost 3/4 of scientific researchers are men. In the EU, it's a little bit better. About 59% are men, but less than 1/3 of researchers are women in Germany, which was surprising given a female head of state, Finland, Hungary. And women overall, if you step back across the EU, have about 1/3 of jobs in high-tech manufacturing and high-tech services. So it's not just STEM, but it's related industries. There have been a couple of bright spots as you look globally at countries that have been able to close that gender gap. For example, in Bulgaria, Portugal, Denmark, Norway, Thailand, Argentina, Guatemala, Bolivia, New Zealand, they have been, in fact, been able to ensure that women are the majority of scientific researchers. So many of the countries that have actually closed that gender gap are former Soviet bloc countries that have grown up with a history of having women across all types of jobs, but many are not. We've also, though, seen areas of improvement, if not fully closing the gender gap. Significant improvement, for example, across the EU. Now women are about 40% of scientists. That's up from just 32% 10 years ago. So pretty fast rate of improvement, which is wonderful. Let's continue and accelerate that. If you look a little closer to home for me in the US, only 1 in 5 computer science graduates today are women. That's actually half the rate that it was 20 to 25 years ago. So we've in fact made quite a bit of negative progress. And if you think about the intersectionality of not just women, but also women of color, it's even more dire. So Black women in the US have 3% of all computing jobs, and Latinas have just 1%. So how do we not only solve this for women and girls, but also in particular, women and girls of color? And when we solve it for that group, I think we will solve it for men and boys of color, as well as all women. On the next page, we looked at the UK in particular. And in the UK specifically, you'll see a pretty broad range. About almost 40% of students in higher education in the UK are women in physical science and math broadly. And then about the US average and many other countries average, about 1 in 5 graduates in students enrolled in higher education in computer science and engineering technology. So a range from 1 in 5 to 1 in 3 or so, or 2 in 5 across different disciplines. So that's the gap that we're talking about. That starts earlier on and continues later on as they get into the workforce as well. Before we get into the solutions, wanted to take a moment to talk a bit about COVID-19. And on the next page, we've seen quite a bit of impact as we look around the world of COVID, not just from a health perspective, but also from a leadership and company perspective. And 3 groups in particular have been disproportionately affected by COVID in the job, in the workplace. Now, this research is US specific as the deepest dive that we had, but the trends that we see in terms of available time, impact on mothers in particular, impact on women of color, people of color, have been pretty consistent around the globe. So I'll share some of this data as illustrative of the broader global trends that we're seeing. 3 groups in particular. First, mothers, and mothers of young children in particular. About 40% of those mothers, at least in the US, have added 15 hours or more a week to their weekly calendar. That's a very healthy part-time job. So it's 40% of mothers compared to about 27% of fathers. And that's already off a very unequal base. So pre-COVID, women around the world do about 2 to 3 times as much unpaid care work as men do. So unpaid care work is shopping, cooking, cleaning, taking care of kids, taking care of parents. About 80% of that, interestingly, is the shopping, cooking, cleaning part. Only about 15% of that is taking care of kids. But off that unequal base of 2 to 3 times what men do, more mothers of young children added quite a bit more to their weekly calendar, largely because of remote schooling in many cases. And as a result, at least in the US, 1 in 4 mothers are worrying that that's going to affect their performance. And about 1 in 3, 1 in 4, depending on the group, are thinking about downshifting their careers, so taking on a less strenuous role or stepping out of the workforce altogether. We've in fact lost many more women in this pandemic in the workforce, both temporary and permanent unemployment, than men. Black women, as an example of women of color, have also been disproportionately affected. Over 52% of Black women, at least in the US, report being an only in their group. So they're the only Black women on their team. They're also 1.6 times more likely to hear demeaning remarks about other Black women. But in this pandemic, they've also been disproportionately affected from a health perspective. So you have the coming together of inequalities in the workplace with health inequalities. Black women are 2.5 times more likely than their female peers to have experienced the loss of a loved one, but 1.5 times more likely to not feel comfortable sharing that at work. And so lots of different gaps coming together. Senior level women have also been disproportionately affected, and I was a bit more surprised by this one. Many have felt the pressure to work a lot more during COVID-19 than they did before. Almost half feel like they have the pressure to be always on, and over half have felt consistently exhausted during this time. And as a result, more of them are also thinking about downshifting or exiting the workforce. And so as we think about COVID-19's impact across the board on women and girls in STEM, all the way through women in leadership roles in STEM and beyond in the workforce, these three groups, mothers of young children, Black women and women of color broadly, and senior women, have been disproportionately affected. So on this next and last page, what do we do about it, right? Given the landscape of gaps in early education, higher education, gaps in the workforce in terms of the job mix by gender, and we know we overlay on that a really disproportionate impact from COVID-19. What can we do about it? A couple ideas. One is to give women and girls both the exposure to math and science early, but also the skills and the confidence, raising awareness that they can be just as capable as boys, and focusing really strongly on a growth mindset, that you can build these skills over time, you can get better versus a fixed mindset. Raising public awareness as well for parents to encourage their daughters just as much as their sons in math and science topics. Another theme is around improving STEM education and support, starting very early on in school and beyond, outside of school as well. Making clear, really visible role models, both for women and women of color in math and science fields. Providing professional education to teachers so they know and can support their students and their families. We've also taken a look at how classes are taught, not just in early elementary school, but in higher education as well. And very subtle cues can be really discouraging for girls. It's down to even the posters in the Computer Science 101 class. Are they of Star Trek or are they more gender neutral? Is the problem set that you get early on, in one actual research study, it was to program a Texas Hold'em gambling game that was more intuitive to many of the boys in the class than the girls. And so something gender neutral on the face of it provided a much stronger barrier or challenge early on in the class and caused women in the class to drop out at higher rates. How do we make the curriculum as well gender neutral and teachers and professors more aware of some of these gaps? As well as after school and summer exposure can help quite a bit as well. And that's where the Science Museum more broadly can come into play for sure. As we get into the workforce, attracting, recruiting, and retaining women in STEM fields is critical. 1 in 5 in the UK computer science grads are women, but it gets even lower when you talk about who is actually in a tech company, not in HR or not in strategy, but in a tech role in a tech company. And that number actually drops down over time as women tend to get into other career tracks and shift out of those tech roles. How do we retain women not just in tech companies, in tech fields, but also in tech roles? And make sure that we're broadening that aperture of really strong, diverse leadership to set that role model. And then finally, we'll talk a bit about it today, given the sponsors here and the members of our panel. But how do we improve job hiring, retention, and promotion pathways to make sure that we are very proactively inclusive, promoting mentorship and sponsorship programs, retaining and figuring out career paths, but also succession planning so that we have that diversity throughout the pipeline, and making sure that we have really welcoming work environments that include pay equity, family and medical leave, and inclusion and unconscious bias training. All of those can create the right work environment, not just for women, but also for men, and encourage them to both start and stay in STEM and tech fields. One thing that I've seen a number of, not just technology companies do, but other companies do as well, is set very ambitious targets for attraction at the front end, and then retention, and then debiasing a lot of their people processes. We can do the closest thing to a scientific experiment now with resumes. I can give you all exactly identical CVs or resumes, down to the bullet points, the font size, everything that we write. And one is John Doe at the top of it, and the other is Jane Doe, or any generically male and female name. And men and women will ascribe greater leadership and higher potential to this imaginary John Doe CV. And should the woman put active parent teacher association member or any other signal that they're an active parent on that resume, 85% or so less likely to get called in for an interview. And so this is the gender bias that we see, not just in STEM, but beyond in the workplace. How do we equalize for that at the front end, and then make sure that as we're retaining and promoting people throughout those careers, we're debiasing that process as well. So with that, Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kweilyn. There's so much there for us to get our teeth into for the rest of the discussion. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your personal story as well. So I'm going to kick off just with a question, and I'm going to push it back to you to start with, Kweilyn, and then open up to everyone. A sort of practical, what can I do sort of a question. So what can you do within your company to support getting more women into your recruitment pipeline?
Absolutely. At an individual level, I think there's quite a bit you can do. You can be a really proactive sponsor and ally. And what we see across the board for women, not just in STEM, but broadly, is women tend to be over-mentored, but under-sponsored. When it really counts to stick out your neck and risk your political capital to create an opportunity for another woman, that happens less for women naturally or in the course of day-to-day business than for men. And so be proactive about seeking out women to sponsor. And you could even do it in other groups around or outside your sort of natural sphere. I think more broadly as leaders in your organization, things that you can do is make that an expectation of everybody on your leadership team. I know one organization, for instance, that said, list on your annual performance review 3 people that you are sponsoring who do not look like you, whatever that might mean, whatever diversity that brings upon. How are you going outside of your comfort zone? Because that is an expectation of leaders in our company. So individually, I think there's a lot you can do. And then as a broader organizational leadership team, you could also set pretty aspirational targets and get others to jump in more creative ways to attract and retain diverse talent of all types, women and beyond.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to open that question up to the rest of the panel. Felicia, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I think, first of all, at Sanofi, we're really dedicated to the 50-50 gender gap across the organisation as a whole. So by 2025, we've made a commitment that all senior leaders will be 50% females. So first of all, I think I loved everything that you said, especially about having aspirational goals in particular. But I also think it's about womanhood. And for those of us women who are in leadership roles or even in your first time like line management type of role, what can you do to ensure that you're listening to the aspirations of the people that are in your team, in particular women? Are we being inclusive? So are we making it easier for mothers, first time mothers, second time mothers to come back to work? But also those women who have taken like longer gaps in their careers. What are we doing as an organisation to introduce those women back into the workforce? Just because you've taken 10 years off to look after your children doesn't mean that your brain no longer works, for example. So I think there's us as women, we can do things to encourage other people, but also Sanofi, I have to say, as I've said, we're most definitely dedicated to 50% women by 2025.
Thanks so much, Felicia. Catherine, would you like to go next?
Thanks. Yes, some very interesting points in that. Thanks, Kweilyn. We're in our early in career programs, so whether that's an apprenticeship or graduates, we're actually doing very well. We've managed to up the talent pool that's attracted to Cisco, so that we are doing very well in our diverse hiring. Part of that is running girls only programs when girls are in school to attract them. Part of that is about showing them role models. So if you ask us to come along to your career evening, we'll make sure that there are people of colour, we'll make sure that there are women. So those girls can actually see people like them are part of Cisco, and obviously that encourages more attractive place for them to work. We also looked right across the board at our wider hiring. We're in the midst of interview training for our entire leadership base to look at making sure that we're as diverse as we can be, that we're not showing unconscious bias, and we're putting everyone through that training to make sure that we are being as clear as we can. And we're also looking in different places. We're going out and trying to find women who've got equivalent transferable skills to the ones that we're looking for, and making sure that our job specs don't put them off. We've done a lot of work in changing our wording to try and make sure that women are attracted to the positions that we have available.
Fantastic, thank you. Karen, finally to you.
Thank you, and excellent there, Kweilyn, some really good example, and I think I might try to steal your slides with some excellent information in there. So from a Centrica's point of view, I think we're very similar to most large organisations. We want to change how our approach, we look at our language that we're using. We've made some excellent commitments recently around, we're bringing in 1,000 apprentices in our smart metering organisation, and we have an aspiration of 50% females. That is huge when you look at our field operation, which is currently sitting at around 94–95%. So that extra 500 will have an impact on that, and it's very much about seeing yourself, holding that mirror up and being able to see. One of the great things that we're trying to do now is really trying to see, what does it feel like? We can see also great things in job descriptions and have some great conversations, but what does it feel like when you come in? So being able to hold that mirror up and really holding ourselves to account is really what we're concentrating on.
Fantastic, thanks everyone. We'll move on to another question, but just a call out to everyone watching and listening. Please do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will come to those shortly. We've mentioned it a couple of times there with Catherine and Karen, and I'm just going to come back to you on this about young people. And sort of building those routes in for young women and young people coming into your organisations. So Catherine, let's start with you. I know you've got a lot of experience in building routes into work for young people. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've achieved that?
Yeah, we start in year 7. We've got programs where we go into schools, we take in some workshops, mostly trying to just interest them, incite them, inspire them to think about the world of digital tech, STEM, however you want to frame it, as somewhere that they can see a future. Our work experience programs start from year 10, and yes, we've had to go online quite successfully, and actually going online has helped us tremendously because it's made it move away from being southeast biased, because that's where we've got lots of offices, to it's available to anyone from right across the UK and Ireland, and they can come along and be part of those programs. And what we do there is we find all the different roles we can at Cisco, and we put them in front of these young people and say, you could do this. Obviously, we're heavily biased towards showing them as many women and girls that we've got in Cisco as we can, so that it feels like a place that they'd be comfortable. And in fact, next week, we've got our girls only work experience. So there's from 16 to 18-year-olds who identify as female can come along to our work experience next week. And in even sort of newer program, working with UCL, trying to show girls who are currently studying maths. We saw from Kweilyn's slide earlier that actually there's a lot of interest in maths, but trying to show them that actually the future of AI and machine learning can rely on the skills that they've got. And if it's going to be ethical, then actually attracting more women to be a part of that world is an exciting prospect for their career. So we've got lots of them coming along to do a day with us and learn more about it. So it's really about showcasing anything we can that is new, interesting, exciting and inspiring to bring young people into our company.
Thanks, Catherine. That's great. You've got so much going on. It's brilliant. Karen, I know that apprentices are a big part of what you're doing at Centrica. Maybe you could share some of that experience, which I think has been different recently, again with COVID, a bit like the work experience with Catherine having to go online.
Yeah, it has been really kind of, we thought we would be ready to do a bit more virtual until it hit, and then we realised we weren't quite as ready as we'd like to be, and it's been a very steep learning curve for lots of different reasons actually, but we did manage to start 50 apprentices last year, and they're well on the way to finishing their apprenticeship this summer. Unfortunately, if I look at those, they're all young lads actually, but this year already, looking at our intake, we're already sitting at 60 female offers, which is again, you know, just quite unbelievable towards that target. Within our grad programme, we have various champions and people who sponsor the kind of local schools. So within our grad programme, we're very much, I think it was last year's intake was 52% female, 48% male, and it's gradually come closer to that 50-50. I mean, I think about 5 years ago it was nowhere near that, but their commitment very much to go and to talk to the schools and mentor young, particularly young women, but mentor young people on choosing a career with somewhere like Centrica, because it's not just about the smart meters and going into people's homes. We have so many others, you know, we've got the engineering and heat pumps, just so many other different ways and routes into a kind of STEM career. And it's about telling them about them and sharing them and supporting them and show them the art of the possible. I know that when I was at school, we didn't always kind of have those types of chats. So it's always really nice to get in, even talking to them about supporting them with their applications or even their CV at year 10, really get them thinking about the things they have done, and you know, even reflecting on some of the stuff that Kweilyn said around, you know, your day-to-day life and the experiences that you have, and supporting your parents or your friends, and just getting them to bring some of that stuff to life really allows them to think of what's possible and how we can support them in that.
Thanks so much. We've mentioned COVID slightly there, the elephant in the room. And Kweilyn, you spoke a little before about the disproportionate impact that it's had in women in the workplace. Is there any more you wanted to say about that here while we're on that topic?
Yeah, well, I think COVID's impact, as we think about both the health aspect and then the economic and job impact, thinking about those two things together, and then disproportionately that impact on women of color, girls of color, those with less economic means, right? There's many dimensions of diversity that matter here. Socioeconomic is a critical one as well. I think just being thoughtful that these things are compounding each other. We already had gaps. COVID is further accelerating those gaps. And it's going to be even more challenging than before to get women of color, girls of color into STEM fields, because there's many more immediate, right here, right now, challenges that they're facing. And so I think to really redouble our efforts, accelerate our efforts for those who can least afford these gaps to widen, and they're widening as we speak, is important to keep in mind.
Great, thank you. And I can see in the Q&A we've had some questions about intersectionality as well, which both that and those questions link very nicely to my next question to you, Felicia. How do we go about attracting and supporting more diverse people into STEM careers?
You know, thank you. So I think, first of all, it's brilliant that we've acknowledged that we do need to bring a more diverse workforce into STEM. Because I think it's really important in order to maximize innovation, creativity, that we're drawing from people with the widest backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. And I think ultimately we have to start from the very beginning. So a child. And if we look at a child's journey through education and how their first experiences with science, and those are the opportunities to inspire them, to make them excited about the subject area. I think back to perhaps how an 8-year-old already is faced with some obstruction in terms of the stereotypes that are out there, and how they will first think, as you said, Kweilyn, about Albert Einstein, and traditionally think that a STEM subject, engineering and so on, is traditionally a boy's job. And then I was also thinking today in preparation for this, that the first practical lesson a child probably has, which I found the most exciting with regards to science, is around about the age of 11. So I think it is about engaging from a very young age, so primary school, secondary school, but also it's about good, solid careers advice as well. I know it's about being able to say to kids that it's not just about, as you said earlier, about the traditional roles, you know, doctor, dentist, veterinarian. Is actually about digital means. There's so many different areas of science, and I think it's important that schools take a little bit of responsibility there in engaging with students, giving them solid careers guidance, and it not sounding so bleak that if you don't want to be a doctor or a pharmacist, then why are you choosing, you know, chemistry, biology or physics, when in fact you can take those subjects and the world is your oyster to some degree. And then if we just tackle also the socio-economic piece as well, which I think is really important, that traditionally a lot of kids that are from poorer backgrounds, and perhaps their parents haven't gone to university, it's about increasing the aspirations for them as well. And that again starts from a very, very young age, sort of drip feeding that belief, that self-belief in themselves. It doesn't matter what your parents have done or what your family's done, it's about you yourself and what you can achieve. And I think there needs to be a little bit less of a focus on, so let's just acknowledge, one, that there is bias, but two, a little bit less of a focus on what university you go to and more about the journey and what you're going to learn. I think all of these little things that we can do, and creative thinking and outside of the box thinking, we can start to see diversity in STEM. So once we, you know, 10 years time, we'll have more people from different ethnicities, with disabilities, socioeconomic background and status. So I'd start there.
Thanks, Felicia, that's brilliant. Looking at another sort of angle of diversity, Catherine, I know that you're passionate about your work with people who are not neurotypical. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we didn't start out with a goal to be experts in students who are not neurotypical, but actually found them attracted to our work experience programs and other programs that we run in school. And then found actually the accommodations that you need to make are not that big to make them feel at home. So we've got much more structure now in our timetables. We pre-announce our timetables so they can get comfortable with them. We've done some visits. So when it was a face-to-face offering, we've done some visits to the offices in advance just to help them get used to it. Actually, online suits a lot of them better because you're in an individual space, you're in your space. We are still encouraging people to use video as well as audio, but obviously if you feel overwhelmed, you can switch your video off, whereas you can't sort of easily hide your face. We've made some links with specialist schools, so there are some of those students that are coming to us as a preference because we've made those links and we've made them feel comfortable with Cisco as an employer. And actually we're making those accommodations in our assessment programs and in our business. You know, who knows when we all get back to the office, but actually there are small things that we can do there as well, just to make those people feel more at home, feel that it's a place for them to build a career. You know, all areas of diversity are really important. We want to make sure we are full spectrum in terms of attracting that workforce. And that's a very big talent pool that we've got to make sure that we attract people to our company from there.
Thank you, Catherine. And Karen, if I can come to you, I know that Centrica has recently joined the Tech She Can Charter. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it came about?
So yes, we have. So we wanted to kind of partner Tech She Can. They're a kind of organisation led by KPMG and a number of other kind of large organisations where we target not just young women, but actually, as we talked about earlier, all females and from all walks of life, to just really show them the art of the possible. There are lots of people who are retraining because of COVID, and as well as showing people that the word apprenticeship doesn't mean that you're 17 and straight out of school. We can offer apprenticeships at any age, to any gender, to any socioeconomic background. We are really open to kind of giving people that career, and The smart apprenticeship is about getting into people's homes really and changing over the traditional gas and electric meters to smart meters. So I'm sure that a number of you will have those. I think we've now done it in 8 million homes. So and still have somewhere in the region of I think it's 14 million to go. So it's a kind of the start and what is really a excellent career through through the STEM subjects, but also through the kind of field operations. It allows all different people to do that. If you've got a driving license and you're interested, it's an excellent opportunity to do something different. It's very well paid and some excellent working conditions. That was a bit of a plug for my advert, but actually, all things considered, it is really open to so many different people. In terms of TechSheCan, they're an excellent organisation who've really helped us with the language we use. We use a tool called Applied, which looks at the language used in our job ads and how we interact with people. And just making sure that we use the correct language, that we're very clear in what we're looking for. I think, everybody seems to know these days, if you make a list of 10 things that you would like people to have, if a male looks at them and thinks he can do 2, he'll apply because he thinks he'll learn the others. And females tend to look at them and think, actually, I can only do 7 of those, I won't apply. So it's about how you use those bullet points and how you attract the right kind of people to your job and really allow it. The more it just becomes easier, the more diverse your workforce, the more diverse your interview panel, the more diverse the people that people interact with, then you attract a more diverse workforce, which in itself just kind of grows and grows and absolutely gives us the right workforce for the future. TechSheCan through KPMG, and I'll share the link after we're done today. They have been superb and given us lots of kind of hints and tips and different ways of doing things, and really have helped our recent campaign. So I'm quite excited about the future with them.
Fabulous, thank you. And just staying with you, Karen, something else that is top of the agenda for many of our organisations, obviously, is the sustainability, climate, the green agenda. What sort of crossover is there here? What important role can women play in the future of green jobs in energy, do you think?
I think women can play an important role in absolutely everything that they do, whether it's green jobs or anything. And I think one of the things around this kind of entry-level smart stuff that we're currently doing is that will those roles eventually become working with heat pumps. They eventually become electric vehicle charging units. We've made a commitment that will be net zero by 2050, and all of those types of things, whether it be smart meters in the home, your heat pumps, or indeed your charging units, will all kind of go towards that decarbonisation of homes. And I think you have to reflect your customer. You have to reflect if what we have is 95% male, that's certainly not what our customer base is. So in terms of female role and returners, and whether they're returners or new roles, these roles are open to everybody to kind of, play their part and show that we can go towards net zero in 2050.
Fantastic, thank you. And obviously sustainability and climate are crucial to our work here at the Science Museum Group too. And shameless plug for a second, if anyone is interested in attending our event series on climate and sustainability, then we're very happy to send you the links. Please just ask our team for details. We had a fantastic event a couple of weeks ago with Hannah Fry and Jane Goodall, amongst others, and we've got future events with Maggie Adarin-Pocock, Tim Peake, Helen Sharman, John Snow, and lots of other people as well. So please do contact us if you'd like to come along. I've got one more question which I'm going to ask, and then we're going to move to the questions that are coming in from the audience. Thank you all for those. This one I think actually chimes with a lot of the things that are coming in from the audience, but I'm aware of time, so I'm going to ask you to give me a kind of short answer to this, even though it is these are some quite meaty issues, but then we can move on to some related questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with Catherine, and we'd like to talk a bit about what more we can do to help young people and their schools and parents to unearth the vast number of careers that there are within the STEM industries. How, if you're not a scientist or an engineer, how do you know what your children should be looking for?
We actually found that, I mean, the biggest route for early in career people into Cisco is through degree apprenticeships. And we were finding there was quite a lot of resistance to apprenticeships from parents, perhaps from parents who don't associate them with high tech and with gaining a degree. So we run briefing sessions for parents. So early evening, online, come along, we do a bit of a pitch about jobs in tech, about what it could be. And we also talk about the program that their student is applying for. So best way is to get them on side and share some of the things we know about the diversity of roles. There's no way a parent could know about what's happening in IT today unless they're part of our industry. So we open it up, they can dial in, they can be online and learn more about us, the industry, and tech in general.
Brilliant, that sounds great. As a parent, my son's a lost cause, unfortunately, but that sounds great if he wasn't. Felicia, let's move back over to you. I know you're really passionate about the role that schools can play here and how we can help them to help their pupils.
Yeah, I think, just back to the core question, I think generally I was thinking back to my son having to make decisions about his GCSEs, and they have parental evenings for you to go around and see the subject areas. And I think that's also a perfect time, just very similar to what Catherine said about briefing the parents about the wealth and the broad range of roles that are out there if a child was to choose a science and pursue that for A-level or even just maths. So I think kind of goes back to what I said about good careers guidance. So when you have the opportunities to have the parents there, brief the parents about the depth and breadth of the roles that are available. And I also just wanted to say that I also think representation is very key to diversity and inclusion as well. And there isn't enough of that at the moment. And you find all too often that people feel that it's not a career area for them because they don't see somebody that looks like them. Thanks.
Thank you. Karen, so we've talked about parents a bit and schools, but what about the young people? How can we engage with the young people directly?
I think there's a responsibility on us to kind of share what we do, whether that be on Facebook, on Snapchat, whatever we want to kind of engage with young people. And I suppose that part of it is being able to see someone like yourself, very much to Felicity's point, what makes it exciting? Why would they want to do it? There is a bit about parents, but there's also a bit about talking to young people directly about the art of the possible. Sometimes young people don't get the opportunity really to kind of know that there's different, all different types of careers out there and that anything's possible. And maybe their parents don't know about it, but if we inspire them and tell them about it, there's a better chance that maybe they will see something that they've never seen before and they'll want to be part of.
Great, thank you. And finally, Kweilyn, and as you touched on at the beginning, you're really passionate about the socialisation of boys versus girls within STEM subjects and how that affects their choices. Can you just sort of round off this part of the conversation with some more reflections on that?
Absolutely. I think when girls are exposed to different ways or different examples of how they can change the world for the better through technology, through computer science, they actually get very excited about it. But when the image presented or talked about is, a boy or two in a garage in some sweatshirt, then it's not quite as appealing. So how do we show examples of women and men who have changed the world for the better and how this very scalable approach has helped? I think that makes a really big difference. And Felicia was talking about this. I think the exposure really, there's a huge gap, both by gender and by race. So when we ask kids that are young, do you know somebody who works in technology or computer science or STEM? Early on, the differences both by gender and race are slight. They expand over time. So by the time somebody's in secondary school, if you ask them, do you know somebody who works in technology? Many, many more men and boys will say yes than women. And then if you follow that up and say, and do they seem normal or appealing to you? Does their life seem appealing to you? Again, the gap will increasingly widen. And so how do we decrease that gap? By normalizing, showing examples of lots of different people so that, as Felicia was describing, you see yourself in that, but you also can see a path to making the world a better place through technology and through some of these scalable STEM areas.
Fantastic, thank you. And that links so well with the work that we do in the Science Museum Group in terms of our science capital work, trying to show that there are people like us, people like you, reflected in our displays, in our interpretation, and in the work that we do, so that young children can come into the museum and see a grown-up version of them as a scientist or a technician or an engineer. That's fantastic, thank you. I'm going to move over to the questions from the audience. Thank you all so much for sending them in. And there's lots of different ones on different topics, but there's one that's more a reflection than a question, which I just wanted to read out because I think it's really powerful. So it says, as I reflect on my own experience as a working woman and mother during the pandemic, I wonder how many women are dialing into this webinar whilst cooking dinner, schooling children, doing housework or checking emails. The concern is that the pandemic is not only widening the gap of those entering careers in STEM, but is also widening the gap for those of us already here. I think is really powerful and reflects some of the things you said in your introductory speech, Kweilyn. I don't know if anyone wants to reflect on that. I've certainly got loads of emails popping up in my world.
I think that comment was lovely, but also raises the point that as women in general, again, I think we traditionally take on we've taken on traditional roles. So we're very much mothers, we're very much probably those who do the cleaning and are cooking and are trying to homeschool and also have a career. I think one, it's about talking about it. So one, we need to keep talking about it. Two, I think we talked about it with the organisations that are on the call today, but we all have a duty to do something about that as well. And I think I can only say for Sanofi that we have a diversity and inclusion task force. Actually it's a transversal project where we're addressing all of these different things. So we're having webinars to educate people. We're going to create actionable allies. But also it's about everybody taking accountability. So I think also I think naturally we as women feel like we have to be charging forward to make this change for the future in terms of diversity, as well as more, diversity in terms of race, disability, socioeconomic, the whole lot. But actually, we need the men to help us as well. So I think men need to also take a little look at themselves and recognize that they're accountable for this as well, because they're fathers, right? They're uncles. So you should want the same for the people that they love in their lives. So I'll get off my soapbox on that particular point, but I think we're all accountable for this journey for changing things for women and girls.
Thanks, Felicia. And in a beautiful segue, someone has raised that point in the Q&A as well. We've got a question that says, there's a lot about the need to change aspirations and confidence of women and girls, but what also needs to be done to change the attitudes of boys and men to normalise a diverse workforce? Anyone like to come in on that one?
I'm happy to chime in. I think, again, it's about making sure everybody knows they're accountable. But if we start from a very young age, when I mentioned that girls of the age of 8 already think science is a boy's role, I think also we have a duty to unpick that stereotype for young boys and actually say to them, because they're probably perpetuating it and they probably already feel that way as well, to say to them, actually, if you want to be a nurse, for example, let's choose a very traditional female role. You can do that if you want to, in the same way that a girl can be an engineer. And so I think we challenge it from a very, very young age in the hope that if we keep embedding that every step of the way through their education, by the time they get to 18, it's very normalized that it's okay for a girl to be in my engineering class or for a boy to be in the nursing or want to be a midwife, for example.
Thank you. I think, Catherine, were you going to come in there too?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I made my career from studying STEM and made my career in tech. And one of the benefits that I found of being here is flexibility, not just through this time. I've had 2 children who are now nearly grown up. And actually the ability to be flexible in my life, to fit both bits of my life together, is also something we tend to focus on when we're talking to girls and to women about joining the tech industry. It's something that people are not always aware of. Obviously, there are downsides. You can be sucked into the always on mentality, but we have permission and we have the ability to work much more flexibly than many other industries. And so from that point of view, for me, it's been a great place to be a working woman and a mother, because I've been able to build that into my lifestyle from my children being born. So from that point of view, although we're in pandemic and it does throw up lots more of those questions for people, you know, this is an industry where actually you can make both bits of it work. You can make the technology work for you to give you a balance. And all right, we don't always get that bit right, but we're in control of it ourselves.
Thanks so much. And that also neatly fits with another question that we've had, which I think is inspired by you, Kweilyn, at the beginning. But we've been asked for each of you to share your personal story of how you got into STEM and how you progressed to the senior positions you have today in your industry, and any key challenges or insights you'd like to share along the way. Karen, maybe would you mind going first?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, I suppose I'm in a very traditional HR role of a women in STEM organisation. So I'm kind of in my mid-50s. I've got 4 children. My eldest daughter's an engineer with Scottish Water. My husband's a civil engineer, you might have seen behind. My children have done all sorts of different things. My other son works in retail. So I think we've always just encouraged our children to be what they want to be and be able to see the different things that can be possible. I've been very lucky. My husband was a house husband, 20 years ago, when it was almost unheard of, and he allowed me to pursue my career in retail initially, and then now into senior leadership within Centrica. I previously worked for Dell. I think going back to Catherine's point, the flexibility is absolutely fantastic. We give great flexibility. We have a working parents network, we have a carers network, and we have a wellbeing network. We're really quite lucky to give all sorts of support to not just women, because men need support too, to be flexible in there, and take their responsibilities. So we've been very lucky, and I think for me, it's one thing about Centrica is it's a real meritocracy. If you're good, you absolutely are allowed to do better and better, and always given a seat at the table. Although our senior leadership isn't quite 50-50 yet, I don't think we're far off. But I think there's a bigger piece to be done in terms of the diversity piece. It's not just about, it's about the overall inclusion piece. And I don't think we've quite got that right yet, and we've got quite a way to go. But I think, small steps and changing our workforce, particularly our field workforce, which is currently sitting at 90% male, changing that is really important. And if we continue chipping away at that and continue having a diverse interview panel and continue being able to hold the mirror up and saying, this is who we really are. We can tell all nice things, but when you come and work with us, this is who we are, I think is really important. But in terms of my career, they have been massively supportive. And I know that quite a lot of my colleagues who still have young children, I don't, but are trying to juggle young children, homeschooling, elderly parents, not being able to get out. I think we've had a completely flexible policy where it's a bit of trust, really. If you can do it, do it. If you can't, just hold your hand up and say you can't. And that's been really important, particularly in these last kind of 6-12 months.
Thanks, Karen. Kweilyn, you shared your upbringing with us. To start with, is there anything about your sort of career path that you could share?
I'd share 2 things. One, I think not letting it get to you. I would say developing a thick skin over time is so critical, because you will inevitably, whether you're a man or a woman or what race you are, face these setbacks. And I think the women around me that I've seen have tended on average to let them get to that more personally, more than some of my male colleagues. And I think building that thick skin over time is so important to keep the persistence and not let it get you down over the course of a career. Would be one thing. And second would be to ask for tough feedback. What we see by gender is that women get less challenging, tough feedback from their managers than men do. Men are much more likely to get feedback that says, here's what you need to learn to run the business. Women are more likely to get feedback about their interpersonal style, even on, frankly, how they dress. I know this is 2021, but this still happens. And when we ask managers of these mixed teams, why aren't you delivering this tough feedback? You know, you are to the men on your team, but you're not as much to the women. They say, I'm afraid of being mean, number one. And two, I'm afraid of an emotional reaction. I'm afraid of tears. But you compound that over somebody's career. And if I'm not getting the tough feedback, I'm not hearing what I need to hear to grow. So I would say, develop a tough skin and ask for the tough feedback early and often so that you can hear it and grow.
Fantastic, thank you. Felicia, anything to add about your journey?
So I think, again, I've had quite a traditional journey to where I am today. Very much took all the sciences at A levels and very much tunnel vision for university. But in terms of career, I think if I wasn't as focused and as driven as I am, I probably wouldn't be where I am, because I don't think I have necessarily was supported very early on in my career. What I was supported was in terms of coming back to work after children, most definitely, flexible working hours, that level of inclusion was there. But what I recognized with one particular organization I worked for was that it felt like there was a glass ceiling. So I myself made the decision, actually, I don't actually see anybody above the grade that I am that looks like me. So I took the decision that actually it's time to leave. And that's actually when my career flourished. When the barriers were broken down, I was able to be myself and be promoted based on my talent and what I can do, rather than what someone perceives because I went to a certain university and so on. And I think you asked about childhood, and again, this is just to be very transparent, that my mum's an immigrant. I come from a single parent household. I'm a divorcee with 2 children. But the difference is that I've had managers who have listened to my home circumstances and have been very flexible in terms of allowing me to work flexible hours so that I can pick up my children and do the things that need to be done. And in return, I think that's made me a better people manager. So anybody in my team is very much open door policy. Do you need flexible working hours? Let me see what I can do to support you. But also I'm very passionate about personal development as well. So listen to people's career aspirations. What can I do to support you to open doors, male or female? And I think that's also another important point.
Thanks, Felicia. And Catherine, last but not least.
Yeah, so a bit like Felicia in the sense of I'm the first in my generation to go to university in my family. I was the odd one out at school. I come from a very low socioeconomic area. So I've always been passionate about bringing people along that journey. And in terms of what's made the difference for me, it's saying why not. So I've been offered a few opportunities that actually were a bit of a jump, I'll be honest. Or I've been quizzing and challenging someone and they said, well, if you could do it, why don't you come and do it for us? So I've made some different career decisions, and perhaps I might have done if I'd have looked at a traditional career plan, just because occasionally I've thought, well, why not? Let's give it a go and see what happens. So being brave enough to take risks is really important.
Thanks, Catherine. And that's a brilliant thing to end on, because unfortunately we have run out of time. I'm sorry for those of you whose questions we didn't get a chance to answer. We can try and do so afterwards if you'd like us to. And I should say thank you to Catherine Bond of PwC, who's put the link to the Text She Can charter in the Q&A box. So thanks, Catherine. And also a big thanks to all of our speakers, to Kweilyn, Catherine, Karen and Felicia, for taking the time to join me and have this really interesting discussion. And thanks to all of you for coming. And I'd also like to thank our current corporate partners for their support of the Science Museum again, which is essential in transforming how people think and feel about STEM. This afternoon, it's been incredibly reassuring to hear such enthusiastic and collaborative discussions around such an important topic. We've heard that there's incredible work being done to inspire and support individuals before and during their STEM career journey. It's also highlighted that in order to overcome some of the challenges, there's a real value in collaboration. No one place or experience can transform an individual's perception of STEM or where that may lead. We need to work together to maximise the impact we have for the widest possible audience experiences. And we've been hearing lots of synergy between different people's experiences as well, which is brilliant. For those of you not currently working with us, we hope this afternoon session will have inspired you to consider joining the Science Museum's corporate membership programme. Now more than ever, your support is vital in allowing us to inspire people from all backgrounds, so we can bring more diversity to the people who contribute to and participate in science and innovation. If you've got any follow-up questions or would like to link up with any of our speakers, please do get in contact. We'd be very happy to facilitate some introductions. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope the next time we might actually be able to welcome you back to the museum in person. That would be wonderful. In the meantime, stay safe. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.